one of the reasons that we put this together is, personally, you know, I've gone to so many funerals for suicide in the last 5 years with my son primarily, but probably 15. And at one point or another, you kind of look at the situations that you end up in, and you think, you know, if there's so many of these things, and none of them really directly related to me or my family, but I'm attending these funerals, you know, maybe God's telling you should probably do something about it, or get involved in some way. So that's really my motivation for doing this. But as I put down I just started jotting some of the names of the folks that I've gone to their funerals, and it's really kind of a stark commentary on who this affects. A football player at the age of 18, just out of high school. I'm a realtor. I sell a house to a guy. 6 months later, he commits suicide in his bathroom. Afterwards, he worked with my son. Age 30, former Marine. A childhood friend of mine in his early 50s. A neighbor. I got a call one day and was told to look out my back window, and she had hung herself in her backyard. And I could see it from my back porch. So a couple of phone calls that I've gotten being on council, people with maybe cryptic or not so cryptic messages about, you know, their desire to kill themselves. And so I made phone calls in each of those situations, one to the individual, one to some officials to make a welfare check. Lake Orion, there were 2 high school students back to back that I had attended. So again, it just kind of has peppered my life for some reason. And again, I have a small window of opportunity being in the public's eye for a little bit, and I thought it's a good opportunity for me to be proactive and at least start a conversation here in the city of Troy. One morning I woke up at about 7 o'clock in the morning, and it was right after a friend of mine had placed something on Facebook, and I had made a welfare call to him, and it happened to be Dennis Ligio, who you'll meet here in just a few minutes. And he was on Channel 2 and was giving his presentation, and it really struck a chord with me, so I reached out to Dennis, and right away Dennis was willing and accepting of trying to put this program together for us. So Dennis is here tonight, and that'll be the lion's share of the business end of the program, but he's got a very compelling story, and I'll let him obviously talk best about it. Again, we know that there's so many factors involved with suicide, PTSD with soldiers. We've got bullying, people being isolated from their peers. Up in my age group, loss of job, marriages dissolve, all those sorts of things. So I mean, it attacks people in so many different areas. And again, one of the things that as I've gone to some of these funerals, again, being more or less an outsider looking in, the devastation that there is with the families that are involved is sometimes more than you can take. People question, how did this happen? How did I miss the signs? How could I have prevented it? And I don't know if there's really any cut and dry answers with all of that. The families are left with unanswerable questions. And there's a mental health aspect of this, I know. There's a spiritual aspect of this. And that's why we've assembled the panel that we have here tonight. And hopefully we'll get some insights from them as we go through the evening as well, and they can help answer some questions for us. My son just showed up. I appreciate him coming. Former soldier, and I'm not sure if he wants me to say this, but suffers from some PTSD. And some of these funerals that we've gone to have been military funerals. And I always make it a point to go out after these funerals with him and have a good strong chat. He means something to people. All these people mean something to somebody. So the panel, let's talk about the panel a little bit. We've got our esteemed mayor, Dane Slayer, here with us tonight. Dane is going to talk a little bit about some experience that he has as a former police officer, going on calls to some of these situations, and as well as some more personal things. We've got Sarah Shiasis. She is a teen suicide survivor, and we're thankful that she's here, and we're thankful that she's here to tell her story for us. So we have the privilege of hearing her. Bethany Baker is Councilman Baker's, who's in the front row's wife, and she is a family therapist and is going to give us some insights and some help there. And there's all kinds of resources at the back table, as you can see. Marcy Snevice, I had her phonetically spell that for me so that we could get that right. She is a counselor at ThriveWorks, again, a professional that can give us some insight. Amelia Leto from Common Ground, she's a crisis line operator, very important position that she holds. And Reverend Susan Anslow Williams from St. Stephen's Episcopal Church, again, understanding that there's a spiritual aspect often with these types of things, and we like to try to draw those perspectives in as well. So. Without further ado, I'll introduce Dennis Ligio. Dennis, again, his story is very compelling and has put a lot of it to music, so we'll get entertained and educated all at once. Dennis, thank you.
Thank you, Dave. Thanks for putting this together and teaming up with me, and thanks to the panel for being here, and thanks to you guys for coming out tonight to talk about something that makes a lot of people very uncomfortable. This is a very personal cause and mission for me, so I always like to start off by talking about why I do this. This is a picture of me and my dad when I was little. I lost my dad to suicide when I was 14. And my last words to him were in anger. We were riding around in his car, and we were fighting about math, which is something that happened all the time because it was my worst subject, and my dad was an accountant. So we fought about math all the time. But this time was different. He was screaming at the top of his lungs, and that had never happened before. We'd get into arguments and disagreements, but he would never scream. And so I got angry, and I got scared. And when we got back to his house, I called my mom and I asked her to come and pick me up because I didn't want to spend the rest of the weekend with him. My parents had been divorced for a while. So she pulled up in the driveway, and I ran out the front door and I screamed, "I hate you, and I never want to see you again." That was the last thing that I ever said to him. Over the next couple of months, he tried to call. I didn't answer the phone. I didn't listen to the messages. I didn't call him back. He sent letters in the mail that I never opened. I just ripped them up and threw them out. I was angry. I was 14. I was trying to prove something. I never thought in a million years that I would never see him again. That thought never crossed my mind. But my stepmom called the house one night, and she told our mom that our dad was missing, and she didn't know where he was or what he was doing, but that he was acting really strange when he left. So my mom didn't know what to think, didn't know what was going through his head, and she took me and my brother to our grandma's house. And now that he was missing, all I could think about was how sorry I was that I said that stuff to him. I just wanted him to come home. I wanted to say I'm sorry. I wanted everything to go back to normal. And that's what I dreamt when I went to sleep that night. I dreamt that he came home and that we both said I'm sorry and I love you and everything was okay. But when I woke up the next morning, went and sat down for breakfast, I could just feel it in my gut that something was wrong. And when we were done eating, my mom and my grandma told my brother and I that the police had called very early that morning and that they had found our dad and that he wasn't coming home. I remember feeling in that moment like I stepped outside of my body and watched this happen to someone else. There's no way this is real. There's no way he's gone. But it was real, and he was gone forever, And when we found out that it was suicide, I thought that was my fault. Because of what I said. Because I refused to see him. And it didn't matter how many people told me it's not your fault, it's not your fault. That's how I felt. That's what I believed, and that's what I carried with me for at least the next 10 years of my life. And I spent every day of those 10 years trying to pretend like this never happened, or that he never existed, or that he was a coward, and I hated him, and I didn't need him anyway. What I didn't do was talk about it. You learn growing up, especially as a guy, that it's not all right to talk about your feelings. Whatever's going on, whatever happened, you're supposed to suck it up and act tough and move on. And that's what I tried to do. I tried to pretend that everything was okay. I tried to pretend that I felt normal and happy and connected, and I didn't feel any of that stuff. I felt alone. I felt like nobody would ever understand this. I was angry and sad all the time, and the more time that went by, the less I knew why. I did what a lot of people do when they don't understand how to deal with what they're feeling. I turned heavily to drugs and alcohol because I didn't want to feel anything. To me, it made more sense to be numb than to be in pain all the time. And the problem with that, of course, is you can't numb the bad without numbing the good too. And pretty soon, I just felt empty, hopeless, dead inside. And that's when I started thinking about killing myself, because what's the point? This wasn't getting any better. It was getting worse, and if I'm going to feel like this for the rest of my life, what's the point? And again, this wasn't something that I talked about. You look at me in pictures from back then, I'm smiling, I'm laughing, I'm doing all of the things that you do in life. People think about depression and they think about suicide and they picture somebody off in a corner somewhere by themselves with their face buried in their hands, and that's just not how it looks all the time. And in fact, I think that's rarely how it looks. I think that we're out there every day trying to pretend like we have it all together when we're falling apart inside. And that's what was happening to me. Things started to change for me one night when I was sitting at home playing my guitar, something that I picked up shortly after my dad died. I bought a cheap used guitar and I started teaching myself how to play, because music was this one thing that made me feel all right. This one place that I could go to and feel all right. So I'm sitting there at home and I'm fumbling around on the guitar, and this melody pops into my head and these chords come together, and I grabbed a notebook and I started writing, and I wasn't even thinking about what I was doing in that moment. But within a few minutes I had written a song about my dad and this loss and everything that I was keeping bottled up inside because of it. And writing this song changed my life. I'm certain that it saved it. It's called No Resolve, and I'd like to share it with you now. This is how you leave me, bleeding where I stand. I've tried so hard to figure out, I've tried to understand what could have been so hopeless and so painful that you felt it had to end. What was that final puzzle piece you couldn't be no answers to these questions. Got to carry on and try to live. So goodbye, I can't believe you're gone. So goodbye, somehow I hope that you can hear this song. Was there something that I could have done? Might have changed your mind. If I told you I loved you and I need you here, would you still be alive? No, I know it's not my fault. I still carry all this guilt and shame inside. So goodbye, I can't believe you're gone. So goodbye. Somehow I hope that you can hear this song. To this song there is no ending. For this pain there's no resolve. Time won't cover up the wounds when you lose someone you love. If I could ask you one last thing, I guess that I would ask you why. I'd ask you why. So goodbye, I can't believe you're gone. So goodbye, somehow I hope that you can hear this song. I hope that you can hear this song. I hope that you can hear this song. Thanks. So, like I said, writing that song, it put me on a different path. It felt so good to finally let go of some of that stuff that I'd been carrying around inside for so long. I felt like I had finally found a voice and a place for the pain. And I might never find a reason for it, but at least I found this place to put it. And it felt so good to let some of that stuff go. It felt so good to write it out and sing it out, and I kept writing. I wrote a bunch more songs and started a band. We recorded an album, and I spent the next few years traveling around and playing shows and making music with my friends and seeing new places and meeting new people and sleeping on lots of couches and floors. And it was awesome. It was everything that I had ever dreamed about. As far back as I could remember, all I wanted to do was make music. And I was doing it. And I started to feel things that I thought I would never feel again. Connection and purpose and passion and joy, and I thought that was all gone forever. I thought that I would never get through this or get over it. And the truth is, a loss like that at an age like that, you don't get over it. You're never the same. It never goes back to what you knew as normal. But you do get through it. You get through it, and you find hope, and you find what's next. And what was next for me was starting this organization in 2007 because I wanted to talk about this. I wanted to make a difference. Nobody wanted to talk about this. 5 years went by without anybody mentioning his name at Christmas or holidays or birthdays. All the pictures were gone. It's like we all tried to pretend that this man never existed. And I wanted to talk about it. So I started this organization, which I called No Resolve, after the song, in honor and memory of my dad. And this is what I do. I go around and I share my story, and I share that song, and I talk about some of the things that I think we all should know to hopefully make a difference. Because right now, suicide is the second leading cause of death for 15 to 24-year-olds. And right now, every 12.7 minutes or so, someone in this country dies by their own hand, leaving behind a lifetime of pain and questions that'll never be answered in any kind of way that makes sense for everyone else who loves them. And so that's why we're here tonight. And I thank you for being here because you are now part of this. And the goal tonight is to break down the fear and the shame and the silence and the stigma surrounding suicide and surrounding mental health. And we're gonna try to do that by talking about three things: understanding suicide, how to help a friend or a loved one, and how to help yourself. These are three common misconceptions that you hear about suicide all the time. The first one, that it's selfish or weak. The truth is that suicide is a desperate last act by someone who's consumed by so much emotional and psychological pain that they can't see any other way out. It's not about death, it's about escape. It's about wanting to be out of pain. And it feels selfish to us on the outside. But in their heads and in their hearts, they think they're doing us a favor. Depression causes suicide. Depression is a major risk factor for suicide, along with other mental health disorders or conditions. And most people who die by suicide are struggling with a mental health disorder. But most people with depression do not die by suicide. Most people with depression do not attempt suicide. The third one, you hear it all the time, the media loves to perpetuate. Bullying causes suicide. He was bullied to death. She was bullied to death. That might be the last thing that we see, something that's referred to as a precipitating event. It might be the only thing that we see, but it's never the only thing that's going on. And the point of all of this is that suicide is complicated. There's a lot that goes into it. It happens over time, and it's never one reason, one person, one incident. This is Thomas Joyner's theory on why people die by suicide. This is the current prevailing theory right now. And if you have been affected by suicide in some way, if you've ever thought about it, if you've attempted, if you've lost someone you love to suicide, I encourage you to check out this book. It was a tremendous help for me in understanding what I was going through and what my father may have been struggling with. So it's called Why People Die by Suicide, and that's by Thomas Joyner. So Joyner tells us that there's three things that overlap and go into this. The first one is the feeling or belief that you are alone. The second one is the feeling or belief that you are without purpose or that you're a burden to your loved ones. When those two feelings become beliefs and they overlap for a period of time without relief, that's where thoughts of suicide occur. And this is actually pretty common. A lot of people at some point in their life will at least think about suicide. even if it's just a fleeting thought. Difficult things happen, and we can all get to a point in a place where we feel alone, where we feel disconnected, where we feel that we don't have a purpose. But when those two feelings become beliefs and they overlap with the capability for lethal self-injury, that's where there is a serious suicide attempt or death. Now that last circle, the capability for lethal self-injury, you can get there a couple of different ways. You can be born like that. People who are natural-born thrill seekers, adrenaline junkies, risk takers. But you can also work up to that over time through repeated painful and provocative experiences like alcohol abuse, substance abuse, and previous suicide attempts. How could somebody believe that they're alone? And how could somebody believe that they have no purpose? To understand that, we look at risk factors. The more risk factors that someone has present in their life, the greater chance they have for having those feelings and for those feelings becoming beliefs. Untreated or undiagnosed mental health disorders or conditions. Childhood trauma, abuse, or neglect. Previous attempts. A family history of suicide or mental health disorders. Alcohol abuse, substance abuse, and easy access to lethal means, such as firearms or a stockpile of drugs. To simplify all of this, people contemplate suicide when their pressure, problems, and pain outweigh their ability to cope with those things. But again, it's important to remember that suicide's not about death, it's about escape, and that it's never one reason, one person, one incident. Warning signs are present in most cases of suicide, so it's important to know these things. It's important to know what to look out for, because often we don't see this stuff until it's too late. The biggest warning sign is talking about it. Talking about death, dying, or suicide, threatening to do it, joking about it, being preoccupied with death, writing about it all the time. A lot of people who die by suicide will tell someone what they're going to do, but the problem is that they often don't tell the right someone. Other warning signs include talking about feeling hopeless, trapped, or overwhelmed all the time, anger or mood swings that are out of character, withdrawing from friends, family, favorite activities, and giving away prized possessions. When all of these things start to build up, that could mean that someone is in crisis or they're headed for crisis. The challenge we face with the warning signs, of course, is that people who are actively suicidal are doing their best to hide these signs from us. So it's not always easy to see, and different people will see different things. A parent won't see the same things that a teacher will. A teacher won't see the same things that a peer will. So what do you do if you know someone who is in crisis? They have some of those risk factors. They're showing some of those warning signs. You're concerned they might be thinking about suicide. The first thing that you do is to ask if they're thinking about suicide. And you ask it directly. You don't sugarcoat, you don't dance around it. You're not going to put that idea into someone's head if it's not already there. What you're doing is giving them permission to talk about something that they felt like they couldn't say to anyone. So you ask the question. Number 2, let them talk and try to listen without judgment. It's human nature for us to want to fix. So we say things like, it's not that bad, or you have so much to live for, or tomorrow's another day, or think about everyone who will miss you if you're gone. And we say those things and they're coming from a good place, but for someone who is seriously suicidal, it's not helpful. What they hear is another person who doesn't get it. And so we try to just let them talk and try to remember what it's like When you were so overwhelmed with something in your life and you just wanted someone to hear you without offering advice, without offering platitudes or cliches, just think about how good and how rare that is to actually feel heard and listened to without being judged, without being told what to do. Maybe ask a question. How can I help? What do you need? What can I do? Number 3, help them complete a safety plan. I brought some safety plans with me today, and we're going to talk a little bit about that in a minute. Number 4, involve a mental health professional. Call the National Suicide Prevention Lifeline. Text START to 741-741. Reach out to any of the resources that are here tonight. Involve a mental health professional. Ask for help right away. This is life and death. Number 5, educate yourself and ask for help for yourself. A lot of times this is something that we try to handle on our own, something that we try to fix by ourselves, and there is still this stigma attached to asking for help or to seeking help from a mental health professional, and we have to erase that because this is serious and because there is no shame in asking for help. So there are resources here tonight. The National Suicide Prevention Lifeline is 800-273-TALK. The crisis text chat line is 741-741. You can visit our website, noresolve.org, for more resources, and you can visit the tables and the folks back here tonight. So ask directly about suicide. Let them talk. Help them with a safety plan. Seek the assistance of a mental health professional, and educate yourself and ask for help for yourself through this as well, because it's a lot to carry. Safety planning. Again, I brought some with me here. This is about knowing what to do if and when thoughts of suicide return. Some people have suicidal thoughts once, and then they move through it, and it never happens again. Some people have them throughout their lives. I have had suicidal thoughts throughout my life at different points, and safety planning is about knowing what to do if and when those thoughts return. So there's 6 boxes to fill out, and you can help someone to fill this out when they're feeling well. Number 1, recognize the warning signs. What happens to you when you're heading into crisis? For me, it was always the same and still is the same. My thoughts would start racing. I'd forget to breathe, and I would start fantasizing about escape, just disappearing. So what happens? Know what happens to you. Self-awareness is the first key. Number 2, what are the things that you can do to take your mind off these thoughts? Healthy ways to distract yourself in those moments. I could pick up my guitar and play. I could write my thoughts out in a journal. I could go for a walk. Identify the things that you like to do that can help keep you distracted from those thoughts when they're coming down. Number 3, socialize with friends. The most important thing that you can do when all you want is to be left alone is to go be with someone else. You don't always have to talk about what you're thinking, what you're feeling. You could go bowling, you could go to the movies, you could just hang out. But the important thing is to not be alone, because the longer you sit there by yourself with those thoughts, the darker and more overwhelming they become. Number 4, contact family members or trusted adults for support. So most of what I do is speaking to middle school students and high school students, and we talk about the importance of identifying adults that you can trust in your life to talk to open up to. And I'll be 41 in May, and I still need to identify adults that I can talk to. So, the people that you can go to for advice that have maybe been through something similar, that can kind of help you through what you're struggling with. Write down their names. Number 5, if you've tried all of this and none of it's working, you're still overwhelmed, you're still suicidal, you can't shake these thoughts, it's time to ask for help. It's time to talk to a mental health professional. And again, we have to eliminate the stigma with this. Nobody has a problem going to the doctor if they broke their arm, right? Why do we have a problem going to a doctor if we broke our insides? If you need a referral to a mental health professional, you can call the Suicide Prevention Lifeline. You can visit our website, and you can visit the resource tables back here today, but ask for help. It's not a sign of weakness, it's a sign of strength. Number 6, keep your environment safe. Folks, this should be common sense, but it's not. If you have a suicidal teenager in the house, or a teenager who is struggling with thoughts of suicide, psychological problems, emotional problems, one of the best things that you can do is to limit their exposure to lethal means. Get rid of the pills, get rid of the booze, get rid of the guns. Means restriction is one of the most effective ways to prevent suicide. So this is safety planning, and I did bring safety plans with me tonight. Safety plans are also available on the website. Okay, this is the part where I talk about how we help ourselves. I would like to preface this section by saying I do not have it all figured out. I do not have it all together. I am a wreck at times, like everyone else. I struggle with depression and anxiety still. It's part of my life. It's part of my family. It's in my blood. And I struggle in a lot of areas. And so this is how I take care of myself through all of that. I have spent the last 10 years trying to find ways to feel better, ways to feel happier and more connected and less stressed and less depressed and less riddled with anxiety. This is how you practice mental health. Doing at least one thing in each of these circles every day. And the concept here is that one good choice tends to lead to another, just like one bad choice tends to lead to another. I did bring blank versions of this slide, and they're on the table back there, and I'm happy to email them to anyone as well. It's real easy when we're struggling, when we're feeling trapped or hopeless or overwhelmed to self-medicate, to self-harm, to self-destruct. It's very, very easy to get wrapped up in those downward spirals. But this is how you create an upward spiral. And I believe that by making consistent, positive choices, you can feel better over time. It's not always easy. It takes work and it takes practice, but that's the point. It is a practice. So these are my circles. These are the things that I do. Up at the top, for a very important reason, is physical. One of the best things that you can do for your mental health is to take care of your body. Make sure you're getting enough sleep, watching what you eat, and finding some way that you enjoy to move your body every single day. I like to go for walks or runs or some combination of the two, preferably outside, get some, well, not today, but sunshine and vitamin D and fresh air. I like to ride my bike. I started practicing yoga a couple of years ago with a great amount of hesitation because I thought it looked really weird. I'm like, yeah, that is not for me. But then I read about how much it helps with symptoms of depression and symptoms of anxiety and how it can help you just to feel more balanced and centered, and I started giving it a try. I just looked up videos on YouTube and I started in my living room, and that's still mostly what I do today, and I was surprised by how much it helps. And if there is a day that I don't do my yoga practice, I feel it. I can feel it. Emotional, anything that helps you identify, express, or understand what you're feeling can go in this circle. Feelings are real and they are important, and we have to find some way to express them. Can't keep your feelings bottled up inside. It will take you down. I write in a journal almost every day. This is a very simple, effective way to derail the train of anxiety. Just writing out your thoughts can help you understand them, can help take the pressure off, can help you see things from a different perspective, and sometimes it helps me write songs. Music is still my go-to every day. I can't explain how or why this works, but if I'm really struggling with something and I pick that guitar up and I just start running scales or doing anything, really, it changes my energy. Something happens. I can't explain to you what happens, but it works. And it's still my go-to. So if music's not your thing, that's all right. We're all creative in some way. Find what it is that moves you and helps you to express what you're feeling. Talk to someone. Talk to a friend. Talk to a family member. Talk to a mentor or a coach. Talk to somebody at church. Talk to a mental health professional. We have to learn how to express our emotions and how to problem solve and conflict resolution and all that stuff. And I'm still really terrible at all of these things. I'm much better at writing it out than I am at communicating it in person, but I'm learning, and it helps. Mental, anything that exercises your brain goes into this circle. YouTube, Netflix, video games, social media, none of that stuff counts. It's fine to, I don't know, just kind of disconnect from the real world once in a while. You know, we all need to participate in mindless activities once in a while. I'm not knocking that. I enjoy a good Netflix binge as much as anyone else. But this is about stretching our brains, exercising our brains, reading a book, doing a puzzle, Sudoku, crossword, word search. Even just 6 minutes of doing any of these activities does something in your brain that a neuroscientist could probably explain better than me. But it's an easy way to flip a switch if you're feeling frustrated, if you're feeling depressed, if you're feeling angry. Spiritual is the last circle that I talk about because it's the one that took me the longest to get to. But spending time on a regular basis connecting with whatever you believe in beyond yourself can help our problems feel not quite so big. Meditation is another thing that I got into with a great amount of hesitation, again, because I thought that it looked very strange. And then I started reading about how it can lower blood pressure, how it can help you manage your emotions, how it helps to alleviate symptoms of depression and anxiety. And I read that meditating for 10 minutes a day for 8 weeks can change the physical structure of your brain. That blew my mind, and I had 10 minutes every day. So I decided to give it a try. And like yoga and music, this is one of the most important parts of my daily practice. Practicing gratitude. I am not a by nature glass half full kind of guy. And I want to be better at that. I want to be more positive. I want to be more hopeful. I want to be more grateful. So I practice it. I practice it by writing down 3 things that happened every day that I was thankful for. Just write it down and throw it out. This is another simple, effective activity for flipping the switch of negativity. Just kind of retraining your brain. And on my worst days, I can find 3 things to be thankful for. Prayer, something that took me a while to get back to. I am an introvert. And these presentations terrify me. I've been doing this for 10 years, and I've done hundreds of these, and every time it terrifies me. Because I know I'm going to be standing up in front of a room full of strangers and talking about the deepest, darkest, most personal parts of my life, and naturally, that's terrifying. So I pray, and I talk to my dad, and I ask him to be here with me. And I ask him to help me to remember to smile and to breathe and to be myself so that I can do the best that I possibly can and connect with those who need it. This is how you practice mental health. One thing, each circle, every day. And it's hard work sometimes, especially if you're someone who deals with depression and anxiety. Believe me when I tell you, there are still days when it takes everything that I have just to get out of bed. But on those days, if I can start with something, just pick one activity and do it, then that might lead me to make another positive choice a little later in the day. And that might lead to another positive choice. And over time, these choices and practices become habits. And those habits help you to feel and live your best. I think a lot of people spend a lot of time thinking about happiness and what that means. And for a long time, I thought that happiness meant just constant joy, right? Which is not realistic and not possible. But I have heard that happiness properly defined is feeling content and feeling connected. And those are two feelings that I struggle with. But this is how I fight that. And when I make the commitment to do this, and when I'm following through with this on a regular and consistent basis, I am feeling my best. I am feeling my most connected, my most content. And over time, I have noticed a lot of very positive changes. Life's not perfect. Life's never going to be perfect. There will always be struggle, pain, loss. We don't control most of what happens to us, but we control our choices. So these are the choices that I try to make, and the ones that I try to make every day. And that is how you practice mental health. As I mentioned previously, music is still my number one go-to when I'm not feeling very well. And I wrote this song on a day that I wasn't feeling very well, and I wanted to feel better. And it's called I Will Not Go Quietly. It's inspired by one of my favorite poems, and I hope you like it. Go quietly into the night. Gonna keep on searching, gonna keep up the fight. If I grow weary, I'll just close my eyes. I will not go quietly into the night. Other people's houses always felt like home. After all of these years, I'm still on my own. But it's always darkest before the light. I will not go quietly into the night. It's so hard to believe when it all falls apart at the seams. It's so hard to believe just to keep chasing all of your dreams when you've wasted half your life trying to keep up with that other guy. 'Cause he's got it much better than you, and all you want is enough to get by. But I will not go quietly into the night. Gonna keep on searching, gonna keep up the fight. If I grow weary, I'll just close my eyes. I will not go quietly into the night. I'm still in this house, I'm still in this hole. I still haven't shed my skin. I'm tired of this town and tired of this weight. So sick of the middle I'm in. It's so hard to believe when it all falls apart at the seams. It's so hard to believe just to keep chasing all of your dreams. Not go quietly into the night. Gonna keep on searching, keep up the fight. And if I grow weary, I'll just close my eyes. I will not go quietly into the night. I will not go quietly into the night. Everybody. Dave.
Thank you, Dennis.
Thank you.
Appreciate it. So the next phase here, we're gonna go to our panel discussion, and the first person I want to bring up, and the mayor is so graciously volunteered to come and help us, and I just mentioned it to him, and right away Dane Slater jumped on the bandwagon and wanted to help support this program. So if we could just give a round of applause to Dane Slater, our mayor. And just in a few minutes, just some of your experiences, if you would, and talk about.
Sure. Thank you, Dave. Is this working?
Sounds. Is this one?
Should I use this? I'll use this one.
Pops right out there.
I'm not going to sing, if that's okay. if that's okay. I want to thank you. I want to thank Dave Henderson for doing this for our community. This is something that's very difficult for a lot of people, including me. And Dennis, I know exactly how you feel and what you're going through, because I think I bring a kind of a unique perspective to this topic. I was a police officer for 35 years, so I was a first responder to suicide. I have seen more than my share of suicides. I have given death notices to families because of suicide. I've been an investigator for suicides to determine whether it was a suicide or it wasn't a suicide. And many times the families do not want you to formally say that it was a suicide for them. And many times we're asked in the police community to not title it a suicide because there is a stigmatism. So I've done that in law enforcement. I've done that from the administration side also. But 7 years ago, I lost my brother to suicide. And I still struggle with that, you know, to this day. It's not easy for me to even talk about it sometimes, but because I feel responsible. And I'm sure Dennis can relate to that. Because he was my older brother, he was a mentor to me. He was the thing that I struggled with. You know, this didn't just happen overnight that he committed suicide. there were signs, there were issues. I tried tough love, I tried soft love, I tried things with him. And I couldn't understand why he was different than me. You know, why wasn't he as strong as I am? Why wasn't he able to cope with things? I grew up in a police environment where you would go to a suicide and get done with that, and then you would go to the next run, and then you would go to the next run and whatever. And it was suck it up, move on. In the military, it was like that for a lot of years, and quite frankly, thank goodness, that's changed. And there are people out there that recognize that people need some help. But when I grew up in the police profession, it was, hey, suck it up. You know, if you act weak, they're going to make fun of you. You know. So I never in my wildest dreams ever thought that my brother would commit suicide. And when I look at your 3 circles, that's so true. I never thought that he would get to that 3rd circle where he would use something lethal to take his life. I was convinced of that. And he called me up the morning. Just hang with me for a second. He called me up the morning that he killed himself to tell me that he was going to take his life. And he said to me, I want you to find my body because I know you can handle this. You've done it before. It's something you've dealt with. And so he thought that would be easy for me. It's not. It's not to find your brother. And it's not to have to tell his 4 children what happened. And when I told his children, he had 4 teenage children, they didn't believe me. They said, you're wrong. There's no way, no how, no way. Hardest thing I've ever done in my whole life. And then when I had to speak at his funeral, he, was somebody that meant so much to me. But his kids didn't want me to talk about suicide. They didn't want that stigmatism out there that people thought, that their father took his life and committed suicide. So, I'm here today to offer any help, any assistance. If I could ever help any family to understand what it's like to go through this and to try and prevent it, that's why I'm here today, and that's why I'm extremely happy to be part of this program. And I lost my brother, and maybe there's some way that I can help now to make sure that somebody else doesn't have to go through that again, or go through that. But everything that I saw up on the screen, was pretty accurate, and it hit home quite a bit with me. And I want you to know that you beat yourself up. I beat myself up all the time because I feel responsible for this. And a lot of people tell me I do that because they feel that I'm a fixer. I feel that I should have been able to fix this for him. Even though he went through a time in his life that he went through depression, he lost his business, and I know he felt alone. I know that. And I know he felt all three of those circles that you talked about until it got to the point where he just needed to end it and escape from it, from the pain and what was going on. And I didn't recognize that, and I beat myself up all the time over that, because I should have been able to recognize that, and I should have been able to stop this from happening. And I didn't. I didn't. So if there's some way that I can help stop it somewhere else, you know, I think that's what I need to do now. And I need to maybe talk about it a little more than I do. Dave told me we've known each other for 6 or 7 years or whatever, and he didn't know this about me, you know. And it's something that I don't talk about a lot, but I just want you all to know that if there's anything that I can do to help, I'm here, ready, willing, and able to help anyone to talk about this. I've been through it from different angles, so I've seen it. And I just thank Dennis so much for doing this, putting these programs on, for you, Dave, for doing what you did. And I hate to be a downer. I wish I had a song that I could sing to bring you back up, but that would probably just be more of a comedian part of it. But Dave, thank you so much. I hope it helped telling a little bit of my story. So thank you very much.
Dane, thanks so much for doing this. I've known Dane since I have come onto council, and Dane and I have developed a very good friendship over the last 6 years. We've grown to respect each other's opinion and ability to work with each other on a council basis. But until when I put this program together, I had no idea that Dane had this in his background, because it happened maybe a year or two before he and I even met each other. And as I said, as soon as I mentioned that this was on my heart, Dane jumped right on, and I know he's not that kind of a guy. I mean, Dane does not like to bear all his cards. So again, I appreciate your help in that regard. So next on the hit parade, Sarah. Sarah is she is a teenage suicide survivor, and again, we're so grateful to have you here. Yeah. and to have you here with us to tell your story. So if you could.
Do I press the button, or is this, sorry? Okay, it's on. There's a button here that says push, so I just wanted to make sure that I was
you're good.
Figured out. I always thought about death pretty casually, too casually. I thought about death too casually. Even as a child, like 6 years old, anytime there was even a minor inconvenience in my life, I would think about, how, oh God, it would just be so easy to get hit by a car right now, because then I wouldn't have to deal with not having a toaster strudel, then that issue would be fixed. And it was that I had always thought so casually about death that when I was 15 and things started to get bad, it didn't really occur to me how bad it was. And my mother noticed before I did. She said to me, Sarah, you're not in a good place. You're in a really terrible place. And I thought, well, I've never been in a good place. I've been bullied since I was 6. I had been diagnosed with anxiety, OCD, ADHD. I had terrible issues sleeping. I had depression. I was diagnosed with that too, which seems like a lot. But if I can tell you anything, it all rightfully diagnosed. I didn't realize that it was as bad as it was, but she did. And she told people. She went to my therapist and my psychiatrist at the time and went, my daughter's going to die. And they went, there's nothing we can do. She's not displaying the signs. Because not everybody does display the signs. because sometimes if you grew up a certain way, if they've been there since you were born, they're a lot harder to see. 3 weeks after I turned 16, Netflix wasn't loading, which seems incredibly minor, but when you're just drained all the time, that's pretty much all it takes. I attempted suicide that day. And the next day, I was rushed to the hospital. I spent 3 days in the intensive care unit while the doctors struggled to get my heart rate up above 25. And I finally saw the thing that I had been thinking about for so long, which is, I wonder what my funeral would look like. And I saw it. I watched all the people I care about break down. My father, I have never seen him cry. He cried. I didn't get better immediately after that. I spent a couple of days in a local psychiatric hospital before I returned home. And things got worse before they got better. I started at a new school. I hung around a no good news boy who my family did not like at all, and they made their protests clear. But when you have a child that is suicidal and that's made an attempt, they tiptoe around you because they're terrified that one wrong word or one wrong move is all that it's going to take for you to try again. At this point, I had come to terms with the fact that I was suicidal, that I wasn't okay, and that I was going to die. But I didn't want to die, because I had my little brothers come up to me, and they were crying. And they would beg you, they would come up to you in tears and go, "I can't lose my sister." So one day, I told my mom, I said to her, I said, "I need more help." And she said, "Thank God." A week later, my mom told me that she had found a place, a clinic in Texas called the Menninger Clinic. 3 days later, I was on a plane out to Houston. The next day, I checked in, and I spent 38 days putting myself back together. When I came home, it took me a couple of weeks, but I stopped hanging out with that no good news boy. And my grades started to come back. And slowly but surely, I was a new person. I was a better person. I was a person that I and my parents and everyone who knew me dearly had thought was gone. I was me again. It took thousands of hours of therapy. It's constant work. It's constant work. And when they tell you that it gets better, if you work at it, it will, but I promise you, it will be the most exhausting thing you and everyone you love will ever go through. And I tell my story. I tell this to everyone that needs to hear it. To every child and teenager and adult that I come across in a bad place, To every parent of a kid who is the kid I saw in myself, I tell it to them, and they embrace it. And sometimes I'll get calls or texts in the middle of the night from people I may know well and people I may not know much at all, asking for help. And sometimes they'll connect me to other people. Over the past 2.5 years since I left the Menninger Clinic, I have been connected to about 15 different people. 15 different people who were in places like me. 15 different people who I was able to help. But sometimes my background gets brought up to people that aren't like me, that don't know, that don't understand. They've never been suicidal. They don't have a kid or a brother or a sister or a cousin or a friend they've lost in one way or another. And for a minute, I get a little bit embarrassed. And then I think, why should I? I have no reason to be embarrassed. I did it. I faced a terrible version of myself. I came to terms with my personal and internal battles, and I fought them and I won. And it's not over. It's something that I'm going to spend the rest of my life working hard to fight. It's something that I'm going to spend my entire life trying to keep under control. But it's not something to be embarrassed about. The truth is that I, at 18 years old, have figured myself out. And that's something that I know most people aren't able to do in their entire lives. There's a lot of stigma around suicide, and there's a lot of stigma around mental health in general. But the truth is that you're not weak. Your children, your siblings, they're not weak. They're strong, and truthfully, I'm sorry to tell you this, but they're stronger than you. You can't guarantee that you're going to understand them, and you can't guarantee that you're going to be understood, and you won't be. No one is ever going to be able to fully understand you and what you go through, but you can try. And if you work really hard, one day you can realize that you have nothing to be embarrassed about either.
Thank you, Sarah. It's good to see somebody bare their soul like Sarah and like the mayor. You know, these stories are real. I mean, the fortunate part is we're able to talk with these folks and to get a different perspective. You know, after the fact, it's awful difficult to do that, right? So, again, that's why we're here tonight. So. Next up, Bethany Baker. Bethany is a family therapist and, as I mentioned earlier, Councilman Baker's wife, and she is here to talk a little bit about her practice and what she can do to help.
Hi, everybody. Does this work? Thanks. I'm not going to go off and talk about my practice right away. I am absolutely blown away by this young woman next to me.
Thank you.
All I can say is that thank God that you're here. This most articulate, beautiful young woman is still with us today. Unlike so many people that are not. And it doesn't mean that there's a reason why one person is here and one isn't, but I'm just so thankful that you're here. And in preparing for this today, I had all kinds of statistics being a therapist. One of them being that the highest rate of suicide is men in their 50s, I believe 60s, from the pressures and the feeling of disconnect and the feeling of being alone, whether they're married, maybe sometimes more alone in marriage, maybe sometimes not. And the three men that are here today that presented, Dave for bringing this to light, Dennis for sharing your experience so beautifully and from your heart and without shame, and our mayor of the city to come and share something so personal and to risk whatever that brings. I think that shows the most incredible strength and dignity. And for men to step up in the society where they are told to be strong and to be a man, to show your heart, you are helping so many people who are watching this tonight and so many countless people who are struggling with this. So thank you so much. I'm a marriage and family therapist. I have been for 15 years. I started a program when I lived in California. Started off with 3 kids who were your bad kids in this lockdown high school facility is how I got started. Nobody wanted to go there, but I did. And I helped those kids, and I realized firsthand, and I witnessed firsthand the pain that these children were in. So I created a program, and to make a long story short, it grew from 3 kids to about 3,000 kids. From one lockdown high school facility where the bad kids go to 16 public schools. And I personally was a therapist and would sit with these children, many of them suffering from depression, many of them suicidal, and grew the program to about 50 therapists who would go and do this work. And in all of that time, I can't even begin to tell you how many boys and girls I would see that would come and open up and show their arm and show that they've been cutting. And I'm just going to be completely just bluntly honest. I mean, people don't talk about, cutting and drinking and addiction, and we don't talk about that. We keep that secret. And this is why we are here, that this is not secret. This is something that we need to expose and talk about and be there to comfort each other, to understand each other, and to connect to each other. And the cutting wasn't just about suicide. Actually, it isn't about suicide. I would ask every child that would share their depression, and they would sometimes share that they're suicidal, and I would say, or I would ask, do you want to hurt yourself or kill yourself, if they were honest, because you want to hurt yourself, or because you want to share how much pain you are in and you want to show that and you want somebody to acknowledge the pain that you're in? And I don't think I ever had someone say that I just want to kill myself. It was exactly what Dennis said, is an escape. And so my job as a therapist is to be there with people. I've been doing for 15 years. This is a tough job that I have, but I love it from the deepest core of my being, because I get to witness and sit with people in the most darkest and the place where they feel so alone, and that's where this comes from that feeling. Thank you for your bubbles up there. The feeling of feeling alone and disconnected from people, from life, and feeling hopelessness. And if I can even be helpful in just one moment and bring back just a moment of hope to these people, then I have done my job. I won't go on because we have a long panel here, but thank you for letting me be here. Appreciate it.
So next we have Marthy Snevice, counselor at ThriveWorks.
Okay, so is this on? Yes, all right. I do much the same job as Bethany, and I'm a counselor. I'm also the owner of a practice in Beverly Hills, and we see people from at every age at our practice, from very young to very old and everything in between. There's 8 clinicians within the office. And again, from my personal caseload, I see mostly teens personally. And out of my caseload, there are 4 that have been touched by suicide in one way or another directly. Either they were recently discharged to our practice from a short-term psychiatric hospital in the area, or their father committed suicide and they're dealing with that, or they're actively suicidal and aren't quite sure how to move forward with those feelings and thoughts. So this is something that I see in my practice every single day. And it's not, because I work with teens, that's who I see. But I know the other clinicians in the office, just by virtue of the fact that I'm the owner and we do consult with one another, that there are many, many clients that come to our practice that are struggling with thoughts of suicide or dealing with a suicidal death of somebody that they love. This is a crisis. I mean, this kind of thing needs to be talked about. One of my esteemed clinicians is here tonight, so thank you for coming, Dawn. And I don't know if you'll be mad at me, but if she were sitting in my seat right now, she would have a very personal story of suicide as well. And it's everywhere. So what we try to do in our practice is offer hope and offer help. And we work with people to do all the things that Dennis talked about. We help them improve their mental health. We help them create safety plans. And we are there to sit with them in their deepest moments, darkest moments, and just offer support in getting through whatever it is that they're dealing with. So again, my name is Marcy Snevice, and I've got a couple of brochures on the back table and pens if you're interested. We're in Beverly Hills, Michigan. Thank you.
So next we have Amelia Leto from Common Ground. She's a crisis line operator. She's a first responder, in this arena. So,
I am the Resource and Crisis Helpline Coordinator, specializing in suicide prevention at Common Ground. I wear a lot of hats. I work not only locally, but I work statewide and nationally. I basically just work on suicide in all of my times. And Common Ground is a local network center for the National Suicide Prevention Lifeline, and you can reach us through our local number, through our 800 number, or if you fall into the 248-810-313 area code, and it links you to a trained professional. We are a mixed crisis center with volunteers who take a majority of our calls, who go through a 90-hour intensive training that builds on your empathy skills, and we meet you where you're at. Wherever you are at, you're welcome to call. It's completely anonymous and confidential, and it's 24 hours, 7 days a week. And if you don't find the right person on the other end of the line, it's okay to call back. I encourage you to call back. I encourage you to reach out to our admin and share your feedback. We're very receptive to improving our practices to meet people wherever they're at. And we've done that by including a chat and text portion into our services locally that currently runs Monday through Friday, 4 to 10 p.m. So if you're not comfortable, dialing the phone, which I know I'm not anymore because I live on my cell phone, that you're welcome to text or chat in and connect to somebody and let them know what's going on, whether you're at the height of a suicidal crisis or if you're having a really hard day. I encourage you to talk to someone. The best way to connect is through communication. Whatever way you're comfortable, we're going to meet you where you're at. And we provide a lot of resources and services at Common Ground. If we don't have it in-house, we are happy to find that resource for you. And I know personally I'm happy to find that resource nationally for you. I'm the Crisis Centers Division Chair for the American Association of Suicidology, which is the oldest organization focusing on suicide in the field currently. And Statewide, I'm on the board of an organization called 6 Feet Over, and we provide funds post-suicide for funerals, burials, memorial costs. And we go out in the summer and do a lot of events led by the beautiful pink-haired lady in the room who founded 6 Feet Over, and Suck It Suicide is our baby project, which isn't for everyone, but the people that connect to it really find hope there. And I encourage you to find what works for you in any of the places, because there's a lot of resources locally, not only what Dennis is doing, but the people that we've come in contact through this work. So I encourage you to get to know the other compatriots in this work and find what's going to help you most. And if it's through therapy or a support group, which we also offer for lost survivors, the first and third Mondays of the month, I encourage you to come out and try and see if support group is for you. And hey, thank you for hosting this event tonight.
And last but certainly not least, Reverend Susan Anslow Williams from St. Stephen's Episcopal Church. And again, I think I mentioned early on, and Dennis had put something in one of his slides about the spiritual aspect. And so, Pastor?
Thanks. If the call center is the first responder, I fear too often the church is the last responder, as in the place survivors go to. But the church, I can speak to the Protestant tradition, which is what I am in. I'm familiar with the Hebrew and Christian scriptures. I can't speak for other faith traditions, but as a Christian pastor, I regret very much that so often the church has been seen as not helpful to people who are facing terrible internal difficulty, and that there are a lot of misconceptions. You might have read old books where it was said a suicide couldn't be buried in a churchyard because that was a terrible, and that's baloney. That is not true. Certainly not anymore. But the biggest problem we all face, and we've all been talking about it, is the silence and the shame. The feeling that I can't possibly talk about this terrible thing that happened in my family. Someone told me recently that one suicide terribly affects an average of 15 people. So when I look out in my congregation, we've all been touched somehow, and I'm very sad that most of the suicides I hear about these days are because of my teenagers who tell me about friends they've known in a camp or on a chat list or through Facebook. And some of these children are posting it on Facebook, but there's not a real live person there to rush over and give them that human contact. As a pastor, what I think is the best fight that each of us can provide is to host people to talk, to say, will you give a testimony? Any faith tradition, I think, offers this, to tell your story, to say, my brother, my uncle, my father, my best friend, someone I knew at camp, killed themselves, and I don't want anyone else to have to go through that kind of pain that I'm feeling for them. It's not an unforgivable sin. It's not something that anyone wants to have happen, and it's not what God wants either. The Bible has two prominent suicides in it. Can anyone name one of them? Judas Iscariot, who we are told killed himself out of grief or shame for having betrayed Jesus. We don't look at Judas very often, but he had a history, actually. We get glimpses. He's called a thief. He's called disappointed in Jesus. What would cause him to do that? He was carrying a burden with him that led to his actions. The one in the Old Testament people think about, the Hebrew Scriptures, King Saul. King Saul, the first king of Israel, was gravely wounded in a battle against King David. He knew he was going to be taken away or probably killed on the battlefield, so he told his sword bearer, hold the sword, and he fell on it, literally fell on his sword. And you could say that he was a coward for doing that, or he just knew the battle was going to end. But Saul had a history of mental illness. And if you read the story of Saul, one of the famous stories is he would call David over to play on the harp when he was having a rage. There are signs. Well, in those days, in the Bible, usually they told you had a demon if you had mental illness. Fortunately, we know better than that. But Jesus healed people by calling out the demon by name. And maybe as people of whatever faith tradition or none at all, if we name the loneliness, the desire for escape, the feeling that I just don't want to carry on, if we can name that as the demon of suicidal tendency going that direction and call it out and help it out, we are doing the will of God, who creates and loves each person where they are, who they are, made us with all the genes that go into what we're feeling and all the situations we find ourselves in. God is never too far away to call on. Those that have Bibles, open up the Psalms. You will find every emotion anybody ever felt in those Psalms, from paranoia to joy, to anger, to the depths of depression. And it's all called inspired because it's all been blessed and redeemed by God somehow. So don't keep it silent. And if you're feeling it and you think, well, at least maybe my pastor would listen, yes, your pastor will listen.
To wrap up, suicide is something that it kind of affects us all. Whether it directly affects you or whether you know somebody distantly and it has affected them and their family, or simply just as a community, we have people that are hurting and struggling in life. Reach out and talk to those people. If you see signs, if you feel signs, just have a conversation. Don't be afraid. I'd like to wrap up and answer any questions. If you have questions for the panel, we'd be happy to field them now.
My name is Anthony Gosha. First and foremost, thank you for taking the opportunity to host this event. I myself attempted suicide before. It's not easy to overcome it, and I understand it takes time. And from my experience, it was over a heartbreak. I was going to propose to her. It didn't work. She left me. I internalized that, had an argument with my dad. The last words he said was, "Boy, you need to get your head out of your," insert bad word. And that was sort of my tipping point. So I took his gun from his closet. He was a cop. Ran away from home, took my laptop, wrote a note, sent it to my family and my ex-girlfriend, I guess. And then my phone started ringing, and I'm not answering it because I didn't want to. And I would cry and listen to the voicemails, and the hotel room phone rang, and then I got scared, and I went outside thinking I could drive away and then shoot myself somewhere. And I was greeted by a bunch of cops with their guns drawn at me, and I put my gun down. And long story short, I went to a mental institution for, it was about 2 weeks. Sought help, saw a therapist. I'm doing a lot better now. I'm on antidepressants, but I also attend support groups and so forth. But it's always lingering in the back of my head, why? And my twin sister, who I adore, I owe my life for her. She's been there phenomenal. She created a website, which unfortunately is no longer available. It's called A Dozen Reasons. And there's a dozen reasons why people jump to suicidal intuition. We had a neighbor across from the street who had hung himself. When their parents came home, he was in the garage. And I remember coming home from work and just seeing everybody. I was wondering what was happening. And again, another sort of a mind-blowing reality that this can happen. It's hard to foresee, and I guess I lost track of thought. Sorry. I guess my question is I love support groups. That sounds weird, but Is there a support group for individuals? I go to depression support. Is there some sort of network for individuals who have attempted and who have survived, so you can kind of share your stories and experience?
There is very good friend of mine named Desiree Stage runs a project called Live Through This. It's at livethroughthis.org. And it is a story, a collection of stories and photographs of attempt survivors. And she has built a network of those with lived experience. In the last couple of years, the lived experience movement of those that have lived through a suicide attempt or suicidality, their voices are growing louder, and the professionals and the researchers are starting to listen to people who have survived like you. It's incredible that you're here. I'm really glad. Locally, we know quite a few people who've attempted suicide, but there isn't a specific suicide attempt survivor group. I'll usually refer people to the DBSA, the Depression Bipolar Support Alliance, which provides support groups throughout the Metro Detroit area and nationally for support that way. But I'd be happy to link you to some of the attempt survivors that I know and the networks that they run.
I appreciate that. Mm-hmm. And thank you. And I love tropical smoothie, by the way. Sorry.
I know, right?
Completely random.
Congratulations, by the way, for getting here and being able to talk about it.
Oh yeah, no, and thank you. To thank everybody. Actually, it sounds weird, but like everybody sitting in this room, you should be proud of yourself for just supporting and being here today. It's a good feeling. So, no, thank you.
Thank you for sharing your story. Appreciate it. I have one that came in from the audience. What can be done when an adult college student won't get help? And that's all I have on the question, so I'm sure that's more of a broad. Anybody want to field that one?
I can take that one.
All right.
Not a college student, going next year. Just sent in my deposit to U of M a couple days ago, actually. I think my big thought is you can't force someone into recovery, because that's the thing about recovery is, like I had said, it is an incredibly draining, emotionally, physically, mentally procedure. It requires everything you have in you. And you can put somebody in a hospital, you can put somebody in therapy, but if they're not willing to put in the hours, it's not going to work. At that point, you're really just sort of biding time. The best thing you can do, in my personal, completely unprofessional opinion, is just try and talk to them, because the only way that they're going to get help is if they want to get help. So you really need to just keep on trying to communicate with them. And then as soon as they realize that life is worth living, that's when they'll be able to get the help that they need.
Can I add to that?
Follow up.
Thank you. Thank you. And I think as parents, I'm a parent of 3, and I think as parents, the overwhelming emotion that comes is you want to fix the situation, you want to help them, you want to do something as fast as you possibly can. And so it comes like you need to go to therapy, you need to do this, you need to do that. What I tell my clients and what I practice in my own life is to something really simple, and I just like to say connect, then fix. And as men, we were talking about men, I was talking about men earlier, about how they like to fix first, and some women do too. You connect with your child first, you validate them first. So if they're feeling depressed, instead of like, well, maybe it'll be better tomorrow, or that kind of thing, you're going to connect first. So you're going to say, it must be so hard that you're feeling this way. Tell me more about it. How is this for you? I am so sorry you're going through this, and be with them. That's the connect. If you connect enough, and maybe not, but the hope is if you connect enough, then finally you'll get that little opening for them to say, and then also say, because I love you. I'm saying this not because I want you off my plate or because this is scary for me, which are all truths, but you matter to me. I love you, and this is why I want it, and I'm here anytime. And then maybe you have a chance of them, that little opening for them to get help.
And you're always welcome to call the crisis line.
Yes.
We can talk to you through your experience with your person, and figure out what the options may be, because they look different for everybody. And finding out the specifics of your particular situation, encouraging them to reach out and talk to us directly, because it's always better to hear it from the person themselves. But you're always welcome to reach out to the resources available and talk about what's going on and find out what's available.
I just want to add one really practical thing that I think is probably on everybody's mind. And it doesn't sound very counselor-like, but the HIPAA laws are awful. And when you have your son or daughter go off to college and they turn that magical age of 18, you no longer have access to their doctors or to their therapists. And up until the point that they're 18, you have to sign off on everything. And then they turn that magical age and you're shut out. So while you're connecting and having that wonderful conversation that Bethany was talking about, which is all very, very important, part of that conversation, I think, needs to be, I love you, I want to be there if and when you spiral and you're in crisis. Please sign a release so that I can at least make an appointment for you and speak with a therapist. Because if you do not, you cannot. And it's really hard.
That's a good point. That's a good point. Also, and I know Dennis mentioned this, sorry, I just want to add one more thing. And I think you said this too, always take it seriously. It doesn't matter if the child or the husband or, I'm just thinking about, I'm just really depressed, I could kill myself. Oh yeah, no you're not. Every single time they say it. Always, 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 always take it seriously.
This is piggybacking on that, but casually thinking of death, not normal. Casually bringing it up in conversation, super not normal. So if it gets brought up, if in any way, shape, or form they're wistfully talking about death, that's a good hint that they need serious help and that you really need to increase the amount of support that you have for them. The greater support base that they have, the more likely they are to reach out for help, and the more likely they are to accept the help that you offer, and the more likely they are to seek help on their own.
It's such a heartbreaking and it's just a heartbreaking subject that brings us all together tonight that we have in common. And it takes tremendous courage to share your very personal stories. I'm so thankful that you're here today.
Thank you.
And that all of you have shared your stories. Thank you. I've been to your events in the past, and you're doing a wonderful thing for young people. Thank you for that. And you have an absolutely lovely voice. It's just beautiful. Thank you. I would like to see the words commit and suicide never brought together. I think that they don't belong together, and that's all I wanted to say. I just don't think they belong together, and I'd like to see people stop using them. So.
I agree with you.
Thank you.
I encourage people in my trainings, and the way I speak about it is died by suicide or death by suicide, and giving it a name and being open and honest about it, because it isn't a sin, and it isn't illegal. A lot of those laws and beliefs are evolving and changing. So
thank you. I think that's a helpful term to bring into conversation and share with people. Mm-hmm. And if for anyone who is watching on TV or within the sound of my voice, I just would like to say that someone always cares. Yeah. Whoever you are and whatever you're struggling with, I'm sorry, but there is always someone who needs you and loves you and wants you here. So thank you for bringing this evening.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you. So to wrap up, and you so thoughtfully said it, you do matter to somebody, and whether you're here because you've had suicidal thoughts, whether you've been affected by it, otherwise, we just appreciate your attendance here, and we hope that somehow this has inspired you and helped you along your journey. And thanks for coming. you.